this video, we are going to talk about different experiences that may or may not have actually happened with the hooded man. Now, I found a Reddit post, which I'm not going to read this because it's not actually talking about the experience specifically, but it is to anyone trying the hooded man ritual, please read this first. And basically, this person is saying that they met Father from doing this ritual, and that most people who do the ritual will not meet him, but you will, and that there's no way of knowing who those people will be. That itself is interesting, but then in the comments, we have people pointing out saying that it sounds like he's probably making a contract with this being and that he's sucking out his energy, but this poster doesn't agree with that, but he does admit that Father has converted people to his side. So I do get the impression that he probably is a demon, or at least an entity of some sort that is making attachments to you, if he really does exist. But I just find it interesting that this poster is very adamant that he is not bad, even though he does admit that he's converting people. So I just thought that was really interesting. I don't know what to think on that, because why would he want worship, but only from certain people? This ritual has been requested by many people on Three Kings, and I finally came around to doing it. The rotary phone was a bit of a drag, but other than that, the materials are not hard to get at all for this ritual. Somebody suggested that I probably had bungled the ritual instructions on my Bloody Mary ritual trial. So I took great care to follow the ritual instructions specifically on this ritual case. I dialed the number and waited for the cab to show up. While I waited, I wondered if the ritual setting was supposed to send you into a trance, which would account for the supernatural related with this ritual. I looked outside my house, through the blinds. Nothing. No black cab, or any cab for that matter. I was disappointed, yes, because I had wanted for something to experience and report on this ritual. After a few minutes of checking the ritual instructions again, I thought maybe I had done something wrong. Nope, I did everything right. I got bored and decided to call it a night. It was pretty late after all. I checked once again, just for the heck of it. This time, however, I went for the door instead of the blinds, and to my surprise, there was actually it. A black cab. I was still behind a screen door, but from where I could see it, there was an empty black car standing next to the empty street. One odd thing about it is that I didn't see it from the blinds, but the car is still a little further down the road. Maybe I had missed it. Another weird thing about it, that it had a layer of snow on it, which meant it had been here for a while. As weird as I am sure I had checked the street before, and I hadn't seen it. I grabbed my jacket and went for it. I looked around for about a solid 30 seconds to see if I could see anyone who was the owner of this car. Nothing. It was 3 a.m, and the street was empty, as it could be. I tried the door and it was open. I made a mental note that the amount of coincidences it would take for all these things to occur in a strange, straight, linear line were pretty impossible. Was this a ritual that actually worked? I sat down in the back seat and looked for any distinguishable features in the car. Anything? Nothing. The car was as common and boring as a car could be. I must have waited for a good 20 minutes. Then I might have dozed off for a little while before waking up. I had a weird dream, which I can barely even recall, but other than that, I don't think anything happened. I'm not even sure the car moved. Waking up, I was oddly not cold, considering that it was the middle of December after all. Then again, I had a jacket on. I looked at my watch. Damn, I had almost slept there for a complete 3 hours. I am a deep sleeper like that. Edit. Someone asked me to post about my dream because they think it might be important, so I think I will. I don't recall much of my dream. It's one of those dreams that you might remember when you were dreaming them, but as soon as you wake up, you forget what it was about. I remember meeting someone. It was an older dude. I remember talking to him, but I don't remember much of what we were even talking about. I think it might have something to do with my life, but that's very vague and general, I suppose. All I remember about this dream was that this dude that I met was handsome. I don't think I can put a number on his age, but he seems pretty middle-aged. Not young, not old guy. Handsome, and I remember feeling very greatly towards this guy for some reason. I also think I remember his voice. Not anything particular, he said, but his voice was like a deep, rich, even-toned serenade. Think Hugh Jackman, minus the Australian accent, and a bit deeper. Other than that, I don't remember much about the dream. I thought this might be the hooded man himself, but the hooded man is supposed to have a hood on his head, isn't he? So I think it might have just been a normal dream. I looked about again to find anything of value. Nothing. So I just went back home and did the ritual and followed the instructions to thank the hooded man for a ride. That concludes the hooded man ritual. It is extremely weird that a black cab should appear, but I find that it might have been a coincidence. A weird one, but still a coincidence. Other than that, the ritual seems pretty mundane. We were supposed to go on a journey with a supernatural driver. It seems the ritual might be a psychological one, with you exploring aspects of your dreams or mind with your conscious acting as an entity. It is unlikely that this ritual might have aspects of controlling your dreams or your subconscious. Well, that's about it. Which ritual should I go for next? Another edit. I see a lot of people saying that I might be making stuff up for God knows whatever reasons they think I am. Let me just straighten this out. Never knew Father existed before doing this. Okay, guys, so now we're again talking about this father person. Okay, so now I think we're going to have to end up going down a rabbit hole about Father. Not in this video, unless one of these other things mention him, but I will try to do some more research on this because now I'm very intrigued. Okay, where was I? Okay, I was relatively new to the subreddit and did rituals to record how they function and affect human psychology. I came to know about fathers today by, username, and I've been reading through further experiences on Three Kings all evening. Okay, so I'm going to have to deep dive into Three Kings, it sounds like, but I do have a username to look under. I never claimed it is father or whatever, neither did I imply it. I literally just described what I remember, which was nothing but a vague dream. I have reported experiences and thoughts and rituals before this one, honestly, and will continue to do so. People are welcome to criticize the idea, but I simply will state the truth, even if it doesn't make sense at this point. I should also point out that all people who met Father seem to remember everything they talk about with him, and they remember their journeys very well. I don't remember much of it. I have also read many accounts of other entities on the Hooded Man ride. Maybe it was one of them. I will conclude this ritual here and will not be trying it again. So that was the other thing I remembered while reading this, is that the first story that I read, he talked about talking to his father and saying yes to everything that he said. And in the instructions for the ritual, they say not to talk, because talking, if I remember, it just ends the ritual. I don't really have control in what I do anymore, but this experience turned my life around for the better. I don't know what this means. I also noticed that shadows move on their own all the time. A tall figure is always standing in my mirror, hidden. If you stare for too long, it dissolves and you think it was just something your brain made up. No, this happens every single time I look in the mirror. It happens way too much for me to dismiss it. If anyone has any information about what the hell I met, please tell me. I'm afraid I'm going to suddenly delete the story against my will. Okay, that's interesting. I'm not saying that this didn't really happen, but this doesn't feel related to the Hooded Man. It just seems like they summoned something. And I realized I didn't give my opinion on the previous story. That one actually feels like the most real one of these experiences that I have read, because they're specifically saying that it was an odd coincidence that there was a cat there. And I don't know. I just want to say that out of the experiences that I've read, that seems the most real to me. And go back to these excerpts. I got up to my room and went over to close the curtains when I saw him standing over the street, the man from the cab, just staring up at me with that big evil grin. I closed my eyes and counted to 10 and hoped he would be gone, but no, he was still there, just staring. I completely freaked. I rang my boyfriend and said that I was feeling really ill and could he come home. Okay, that one sounds fake. That one definitely sounds fake. I don't know why he would just be standing up there. Okay, so these other excerpts. And then I'm thinking I will rate these no sleep stories separate because they seem pretty long. Okay, so the first is from Some Creepy Stuff. I began closing all curtains, windows, and any other kind of light sources. Then I sat in my sofa, which is close to my house's main landline, and dialed the following number: 204-96888. Note, if you're going to do this, it's important that you perform the dialing without taking the phone out of the cradle. You'll need to do this, but later. After this, I finally tied a black cord in the phone and then dialed once again, but now another number: 255-15823. Do not take the phone out of the cradle yet. Then I counted to 13 in their normal speed. At this point, I was already shivering AF. So after the counting, I finally took the phone out of the cradle. Yay. I could hear strange noises coming from the other end of the line. I ignored them and said the phrase I was supposed to: hello, I need a cab. After I said that, the person who I talked to, probably the hooded man, hung up the phone. My next step was to look outside the window and see a black cab waiting for me. But instead, I decided to burn the cord I tied on my phone first. The rules tell you to do that, but you can do it later. However, I felt it would be more safe to burn it as early as I could. I untied the cord off my phone, threw it on a metal bucket, soaked it in alcohol, and burned it completely. I wanted to make sure that I won't have any of the materials used or gained in these games except the gifts with me. I tied a second cord to my phone, but this one was supposed to just burn after ending the travel. I followed the rules. I wore a jacket and went outside on the cold, dark, bizarre night. I didn't know if that was supposed to happen, but everything around me was darker than before. I assumed that I literally visited the other world. I entered the cab without saying a single word to the driver, but also didn't talk to me, which was good because I expected him to be annoying me in the process of making me talk, saying stuff like, "Why do you want to talk to me?" But thanks God, that was not the case. It was about 2:48 when my journey started. My next step was a little bit disappointing. I had to sleep and wake up at exactly 3 a.m. I would probably lose many scenario aspects if I fell asleep. But if that was what rules said and was the safest thing to do at that moment, I did it. At 3 a.m., when I woke up, I cheered the silence because the ritual succeeded at this point. I actually expected that because no one who did this ritual failed it in that point. Most of those who failed only failed by talking with an entity in the cab. I felt a little surprised when I figured out that we're on highway, but then I remembered that this also was supposed to happen. As I woke up in the right time, I decided to stay in the cab for more time. It was such a good experience. I saw interesting scenarios, wonderful sounds coming from outside the cab. I saw familiar places with a magic moment. But like all my other experiences, this ritual had a twist that changed everything. Suddenly, my body stopped, and my good feelings went away when the cab stopped with no reason. I didn't get it. I was really scared, but tried to hide my discomfort expression from the hooded man. I'm talking about the hooded man. I really forgot to mention how he was. I was supposed to not look straight at him, but with my peripheral vision, I could notice three interesting things. His hood was really new and shiny, like he bought it just before I began the ritual. But the more time passed in the cab, the more his hood became old and dirty. He apparently had no hands, or they were just covered by his hood. I don't know. His hood also changed colors a little bit in every period of 5 minutes. I don't know if that one was in my mind or if that was true. Anyway, let's go back to the experience. So after the cab stopped and I got scared, everything went dark. Everything. I was about to beg him to finish the travel when I saw a big light coming from very far away. It got closer, closer, and closer. At this point, I can't even describe if my thought was good or bad about that light. I think it's just neutral. The light, as I expected, reached the cab. I almost screamed in terror when the thing knocked on the front door's window. The hooded man looked at it, and I turned my head down to avoid a bigger eye contact. The thing started a short conversation with the hooded man. He talked in an unknown language and gibberish, and the hooded man only replied in body gestures. I almost panicked when the shiny figure asked me in English to give him space in the back seat. I didn't reply to him, but moved my body further to the left. He entered in the cab and sat on my right. After that, that's hoodie man started driving again. After this part, the road scenario only remained in a dark climax, and happy sound from outside turned into whispering. That thing on my side stayed quiet for at least 10 minutes in the travel, but suddenly he asked me in English, "Why don't you talk to me? I don't bite." I felt a little awkward when he said that. The only person I know who uses this "I don't bite" thing is my 12-year-old cousin. It took a long time after all. But after he had tried to start a conversation with me, I realized his second intentions. He was the father. Oh, we do have father brought up again. Okay, so if you don't know who the heck father is, let me explain. Oh, yes, please. So apparently the entity named father is an evil entity that appears to most people who reach a certain point in the travel. He has his own religion or something, and he tries with everything he has to make you believe he's a god. He's actually a demon, so don't fall for his tricks. And avoid talking with him. I believe that the only way to not get tricked by him is not talking to him, and as long as you want to keep your soul for your own and the God of your religion, don't try to befriend him. It was like 4:50 a.m. or something. I don't know. I lost my sense of time at this point. The father entity only tried to talk to me once, about 20 minutes before, but then he tried another way to convince me to talk. He said, "Hey," he said my full name, "would you like to make this journey peaceful, pleasing, and shiny, just like me again?" Shiny? With my power, I can make this dark atmosphere go away, because I'm not what you're thinking. Come on, he said my full name again. Tell me if you want to see the best thing you've ever seen in your whole physical life. I confess that his voice was so good to hear that almost made me talk. I don't know why. It was almost hypnotizing. After that, I knew it was enough. I no longer wanted to risk my life at the cab. I slowly moved my body towards the hooded man's ear and whispered. I reached my destination. Automatically, I fainted, and the last thing I could hear was father with his deep and calming voice yelling, "No, don't leave now, please." I woke up today about 11 a.m. in my sofa. I woke up with an unexplainable good feeling. I almost died. I don't know why I was so happy when I woke up. Maybe because I realized that I was alive and well, but I had a headache that was still hurting me now. The first thing I did that morning was dial this following number, 200082, with the phone on the cradle. Then I pulled the phone out of the cradle and said, "Thank you for the ride." Then I hung up and I felt the best feeling of relief I ever had. I burned the second cord, and after doing this, I think I'm 100% safe from anything I resented in this ritual, so I don't have anything left, and I did everything how it had to be done. Okay, so I thought these were excerpts, but these are full stories. So there's at least one other one on maybe a third. So me and my boyfriend are big on the whole supernatural and creepy stuff. We have performed some rituals together before, but most of them turned out to be duds. So I reckon that this one was just another tale told to scare elementary grade children. My boyfriend had to take a trip with his mates to the other part of the country for job reasons. He usually doesn't like leaving me alone by myself, but I reckon that some time away from me would do him some good. So during his absence, I was getting bored and decided to perform this ritual. I've done some absolutely insane rituals before, so I didn't mind doing this one alone in the very least. So as instructed, I burned the sage and spread salt in our apartment. I already had procured the rotary phone beforehand from a pawnbroker. Not difficult for me, mind you, because I am a sales manager and I know a few local dealers in our area. And I called the numbers as instructed on the website and did other instructions as perfectly as I could. As soon as I burned the first cord, I felt weirdly disturbed, but I had this feeling so many times performing other rituals. The thrill of it, the uncertainty of whether the ritual would even work or not. It was a thrill that I had known and craved for decades now. So I chalked up the weird feeling up to nothing. I looked out the window, and my forehead furrowed in confusion and slight panic. There was a black taxi outside, just across the street. I looked again, just to make sure it wasn't just my imagining things. Sure enough, there was a black cab, but I couldn't make out if it was empty or not. The windows were up. With the small amount of lighting on the street, it was extremely difficult to figure out anything else about the cab. So I decided to investigate it. I walked down and stared at the cab for a minute, unsure what to do. Entering someone's car without permission could land me in trouble, and the last thing I wanted was trouble with the police. But it wouldn't hurt to look, would it? I thought, and opened the back seat to the taxi. The taxi was empty. So I decided, what the heck? I climbed into the back seat of the taxi and made myself comfortable for a nap. It wasn't very difficult for me to sleep, as I'm one of those people who can fall asleep almost anywhere. I've been best known to fall asleep in chairs, and one time even against a door. So I had no trouble going to sleep there. I woke up with a start and realized I was still in the cab. I yawned. Another fake ritual story, I thought, and realized that I was supposed to check the time. I looked at my watch. It was a bit odd. Old. It was actually my mother's, and I loved it. And sure enough, the time was 3:30. I shrugged and went back to sleep, thinking I would wake up after 5 minutes and walk back to my apartment. Now, here's where things get weird. I think I had a dream, but everything felt so real. Interesting. So the other person said they had a dream as well. So did he say he had it in the cab though? Now I can't remember. I say it was a dream because everything was hazy and difficult to remember, just like a dream. It was like having a lucid dream. I've had a few of them before, but none of them in this much detail. None of them lasted for this long. And this has to be the most weirdest lucid dream I've ever had. I betcha it might have to do something with the placebo effect of it. You know, you believe something and you start to see it. That kind of bull crap. So the dream I had is as follows. I woke up. I don't know how long I had been asleep. I woke up to the sound of the car moving and I started freaking out. I sat up and was about to ask the driver to stop, but when I looked at him, he was wearing a hood, a gray and black one, the type you would see street urchins who post graffiti here in UK wear. I started to freak out to the point that I was legitimately crying, but I tried to keep my sobs as plaintive and silent as possible. I hadn't thought that this ritual would work, None of them did. I must have ridden the cab for hours, I think. I saw burnt out fields, huts of buildings. It was apocalypse now outside. I saw no human figures, though, just the whole hum of the cab. My fear had lessened a bit. You can only be terrified of death for a few minutes. After a few hours, you get used to it, I think. At least I did. Not saying that I wasn't scared, but I wasn't crying anymore. At some point, we had risen up to the sky. It's difficult to explain exactly, but I think the cab might have been flying at this point, and the world had an aerial view to it, like looking down from an airplane with a fish lens view. The hum of the cab just stopped suddenly as I heard the side door of the taxi open. I stiffened with fear. Something entered the cab and sat down next to me. I was too freaked out to look at the new passenger. I had remembered that if you looked at the passenger and he would stab you. So I kept my gaze as fixed as possible. Thank you very much. The passenger didn't say anything, but he moved. I could see him fidgeting, and I felt like he was looking at me, staring like a winker, you know. It was just becoming too creepy and too disturbing to be under the constant gaze. So I told him to stop it, but didn't look at him. That's actually what I said. I almost yelled the words, I think. And then he touched my shoulder. It's hard to describe how, but I felt safe, comforted, and like I was back home. He didn't feel threatened or terrified anymore. I just felt like I couldn't trust him. It was like being high on angel dust or Molly or blues. Everything was just so hazy, and it's difficult to describe, but it felt like I had known this person forever, a familiarity that was hard to describe. And he looked like a god. No, seriously, his eyes were the most indescribable color I've ever seen. They were blue, but also so much different colors at different points. It didn't matter back then that his eyes were changing color. Weirder stuff has happened to me in the lucid dream than just a person changing their eye color. But his eyes were enthralling. Everything about him was perfect. It was like a perfect sculpture coming to life. His brown hair tumbled down to the side in gorgeous curls. His skin was pale and shined with an odd yet beautiful glow. His smile bared his perfect bleached teeth, his lips sleek and red. He was definitely very handsome, top bloke. And he wore a crown, which fitted him perfectly, even though in retrospect, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, who goes around wearing a crown in this age? He also had a robe, not a mourning robe, but a proper dress robe, like the royal family would wear. His nails were perfect. His hands were perfect. I had never seen anyone like him, but I didn't have any perverted thoughts about him. He was more like a friend, a mate that you hang out with, you know. He smiled. That's when I noticed his teeth, by the way. He spoke, and his voice was just this rich baritone, smooth chocolate. It was just so alluring. He could be telling me to piss off, and I would still listen to him. I've never heard a more deeper and richer voice before. He greeted me politely with a simple hi. I nodded nervously, realizing that I had been staring in a not so subtle way. His smile was maddening and charming at the same time. It was his confidence, like he knew something I didn't. He smiled with that knowledge. Aren't you going to get off? He asked. Again, his voice was so enthralling, but I don't think that I answered him. I must have been staring at him. I don't remember. It's a bit hazy, this dream. Why are you here, Molly? Okay, at that I recoiled a bit. He knew my name, but it didn't matter. He was a friend, or at least he seemed to be. I don't know, I stuttered like a trout. Is it because? And with that, he began describing my problems, our financial situation. My boyfriend and I have jobs, and we make enough to pay rent and get along. But with the rising rent prices and all the other things, our financial situation is going a bit under. Also, some other personal problems that I wouldn't care to mention here. We talked for hours or even more, and we discussed a lot of things. Most of it was about me. I have a suspicion that every time I tried to talk with him, he would bring the conversation around on me. So most of it was my problem and me, but I did get to know him a bit. He didn't tell me who he was or what he was. He simply told me that he was a helper. At that time, I didn't ask to think. He didn't even give me a name, or when he asked me, what should I call him? He gave me the weirdest answer. He asked me to call him Father, not like Daddy or something, like in a bloody perverted way, but actually Father. I guess it's not as weird because he actually did feel like a friend and a father. At that point, I didn't ask how he knew me or my problems. I guess it must have been my subconscious talking to me through my dream. Many times, though, our conversation, he offered solutions and even told me that he could help me personally if I wanted. I politely declined because I don't know why. I just didn't want to be rude and, I didn't want to impose. But after a few times of him saying that he could help me, I started thinking that he was a bit too eager to help. I actually remember every word he said because his voice was bloody good. His exact words were, I can watch over you, Molly. And I agreed with him. Hey, this was just a dream, and I thought, what the hell? I just went with it. We talked a bit more, and then he asked me if I wanted to go home. Until he had mentioned home, I actually had completely forgotten about that. I nodded and I fell asleep in his lap. But I think I heard him speak to the taxi driver just as I was falling asleep. I was just too out of it to make out the words, and they didn't seem like English anyways. I woke up in my apartment. It was then that I realized that I had probably fallen asleep and dreamed about the whole thing. It was a bit funny, but also a little bit creepy because, to be honest, I never really remember any of my dreams, not in this kind of detail anyways. So I ran the second cord and did all the cleansing stuff that you're supposed to do. But I think the dream might have had an impact on me because I remember Father bloody damn well. I can picture him, perfect and shining and everything. And sometimes it starts hurting my right ribs when I think about him or try to stop thinking about him, I guess. Also, I think I have become a bit more paranoid after this dream because, sometimes you see dark things move in the corner of your eyes. And then you turn to look and there's nothing there. Or it was just a lamp or some other battle. It's been happening way too much, and everything about this just seems so weird. I already put salt in our house, and I even went to the church. Everything seems to be fine, except my ribs hurt sometimes. And the odd paranoia thing. And my boyfriend came back yesterday, and I told him about this, and he said it was just a dream in my imagination. He did try to spook me, but mostly he says it's nothing, and I'm just being paranoid. Okay, but she went out and fell asleep in a cab and then woke back up in her home. So how did she get there?